Hi guys, in this video you will learn how to create your own cool looking logo intro video that you can use for a movie studio or even your own YouTube channel. We're going to be using the new Blender 2.8 beta which just came out recently, and we're going to render it all out using the Eevee rendering engine, which is the new real-time rendering engine that is available in Blender 2.8. I believe I might be the first YouTube channel to cover creating a logo intro using Eevee, so I guess that sounds pretty cool, but I'm not 100% certain on that. I just did a quick YouTube search and couldn't find any. So yeah, I hope this video will be useful to you. So let's go ahead and get started. First off, if you don't have Blender 2.8 beta already, go over to blender.org and click on the Blender 2.8 beta link. Then simply just download the Blender 2.8 beta and follow the instructions as usual. On top of that, you will also need a photo editing software. So if you have a photo editing software like Photoshop or some other photo editor that you prefer, go ahead and open up that one as well. But if you don't have any, you can also go ahead and download GIMP, which is the image editing software that I use quite regularly. It's free and it's open source. So first thing we want to do is we're going to design our logo. Now, I'm not really going to cover the full design concepts on creating a logo. I think that requires another sort of video or perhaps even a course on its own. But I'm just going to show you a basic, quick way of how to create a logo. First off, try to find a cool looking font for your logo. So you can use a number of these websites like 1001 free fonts. So pick a font that looks good for your YouTube channel or movie studio or whatever. Go ahead and download it, but make sure that you note the license. So you wouldn't really want to use free for personal use or demo or anything like that. You want to look for something that sort of says free, just 100% free. So for example, I went ahead and downloaded this font over here. When you download a font, it'll store it as a zip file in your downloads folder. So what you want to do is after you download the zip file, extract the zip file to a folder somewhere. Right click and copy that TTF file inside that folder, and then in C, Windows, Fonts, right click and just paste it, and that will just install the newly downloaded font that you got from the website. So after that, go ahead and load up your image editing software. So in my case, I'm going to load up GIMP, and then we're going to go ahead and start to design our logo. So there's no real hard and fast rule over here. Generally, I create the length of the image to be around about the width of the final rendered video, which is for HD video is about 1920 by 1080. If you want to render a 4K video, then you can put 2560, I believe. But I'm just going to stick with 1920. The height doesn't really matter. So I mean, it does matter depending on how high your logo is. But my logo, I assume, is a little bit smaller, so I'll go with that, or maybe I might adjust it, make it a little bit bigger, maybe 600. We'll close this one out. Okay, so once you have that, just go ahead and simply design your logo. So in this case, I might just use my channel name, and then just go ahead and select the bold font. So now I've put the bold font in there, and then we can maybe change the size. This is the font that I downloaded off the internet. Just go ahead and use that one. So try to make it fit as much as possible on the screen. I can't really see much of the view here, so I might make it a little smaller. Oops, so it's quite big. And then yeah, it's just a matter of going ahead and designing the logo. Okay, not the best looking logo in the world, but this is sort of the design that I'll go for. Okay, so once you have that, go ahead and save it as a PNG image with transparency. Now in GIMP, if I want to enable that transparency, I have to turn off this background. Oops. Oh, but then I lose that line that I made in the middle. So maybe I have to go ahead and create a new layer with transparency and then create a new line over there for this. Okay, so not the best looking design in the world, but once you have your logo design on a transparent background, go ahead and export it out as a PNG with transparency. Alright, so once you have your PNG image, make sure that your logo design is black and the parts in transparency is white. Because what you want to now do is you want to now convert it into an SVG image. Now, if you have an image editor that supports exporting it out as an SVG image, I recommend you do so. But with GIMP, we cannot export it as a SVG image. We don't even have that option over here. So by default, GIMP doesn't support exporting as a SVG, but I use a website called svgcreator.com. So I'll just put the image over there and convert it into an SVG image. SVG image is a vector-based image. That means it will look great regardless of how large you scale it. Whereas PNG, JPEG, they can start to look pixelated once you scale it up to a point. Now it's converted to an SVG image. The output looks pretty good, so I'll just go ahead and download it. So we have one called generated1 SVG, which I'll save to my logos folder. And I guess I'll rename it to something like my new logo.svg. Okay, so as you can see, my Windows doesn't recognize this file. It's by default showing it as Internet Explorer because I don't have an image editor compatible with SVG files. Okay, so now that we have the SVG file, luckily Blender 2.8 Beta supports the importing of SVG. So all we need to do is, well, I don't need to have any of this stuff, so I can go ahead and select everything and delete it for now. I will be bringing them back soon. I'm going to go ahead and hit File, Import, Scalable Vector Graphics, or .svg. Find the image that I just generated, my new logo.svg, and then you can see we have our images now loaded in. An alternate way is you can use the image that you generated, the PNG, and use it as a background image, and then hand modeled these letters one by one, or the logo design one by one if you're using a more image-based logo. But I find that this is a very, very quick and easy, so why not do it if things are that easy? So since everything's looking a little bit small, I'm going to just scale it up by maybe 10 so you can see better. And then while I'm there, just hit RX90 so that we can see it from the front view when we hit numpad 1 on our keyboard. So as you can see, it hasn't done a bad job. It looks pretty good. Looks a little bit flat there, but doesn't matter. The design looks pretty cool. So this is the logo. So the logo has come in imported quite well. And you can see if we tab into edit mode, it's created the SVG by using curves. So this is more curve-based modeling. So if you want to make more adjustments and tweaks, you can of course play around with this. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to join all of this into one mesh. So select everything by hitting A, and then select something in the middle like this one, and hit Control J. Now we have made this one as one object. You don't have to do this one. If you want to animate each individual text one by one, then don't join it. But for my case, I'm just trying to save time here, so I'm just going to join it as one mesh. No big deal. So go ahead and save your work as well. The new Blender 2.8 Beta is a lot more stable than the alpha version that I was using previously. Is everything just, I haven't really experienced much crashing, which is good. Blender 2.8 is becoming a lot more stable now. So now with my logo design created, I can go ahead and create some cool things. Like for example, I want to duplicate this one. I'll show you a little bit why later, and then move it a little bit behind on the y-axis, and then I'll rename this one to is this called curve.000? Yes, curve.000. I'll just rename this one to logo_light, and this one as logo mesh. Then I'm just going to hide the logo light for now. We'll come back to that a little bit later. But for this one, we're going to go ahead and start to define the look a little bit more. So with this one, I'm going to go ahead and in the object data settings, under geometry, I'm going to extrude it a little bit. So 0.01, maybe that's a little too thick. So maybe 0.0, maybe let's put it by half. So divided by 2. So 0.005. That should be okay. And let's go ahead and add in a very slight amount of bevel as well. So 0.001 as well. That's looking okay. Maybe add a bit more resolution just to smooth it out. The reason why we add a bit of a bevel is that we can catch the highlights when light is hitting on it. So I think that's looking pretty good. Although we used 3 different software, GIMP, SVG Creator Online, and Blender, but we've very quickly generated a 3D model from 2D text. So that's pretty cool. So that's our new logo. You can test it out, but I'm pretty sure that you can create SVG images of more stylized logos. If your logo is a little bit more advanced, like if you have those really crazy detailed looking fonts, your SVG image may not look as good. So just wanted you to bear that in mind. So there we have our 3D logo model done. As you may know, if you watched a lot of logo intro videos on YouTube, there are 1,000,001 different ways to create logo intro videos. There are many designs that you can play around with. The design that I'm using here is just one of many designs that you can use. So we're gonna have an intro video with a lot of volumetrics going on, lighting going on, and a wet floor as well. Okay, so let's go ahead, and this is gonna be our wet floor. So select the bottom plane and let's scale it up to be quite big. Let's go ahead and also add in a camera. So Shift A, let's go in front view, Shift A, camera, and hit Control 0 on your keyboard to move your camera move your view into camera view, and then hit G and position it to round about where you want your logo to be seen. So in this case, I might just move it right on center. The logo can be moved a little bit further on center as well. Something around there. Okay, so it's right on center. Just to make the logo look a lot more powerful, I want to add in a little bit of a high angle and move the camera a little down. But just a little bit, not too much. Okay, I'm also going to change the camera view lens to something like I'm going to change the camera focal length to something around 35mm, and then just zoom in a little until we have something that looks like that. So now we've set up the scene for our logo intro video. Now let's go ahead and work on the materials. So the material that I want to use for this one is quite simple. It's simply just going to be a brass material. So I got the material from textures.com. It's called polished brass, PBR0056. It's just like a goldish colored type of material. You can use any material that you like, really. It doesn't really matter. I didn't really end up seeing it very clearly in the final render, but this is the one I ended up using. So I mean, you can go ahead and download the albedo by clicking that one, the normal, the roughness, and the metallic. You'll need to sign up for an account with textures.com, which was formerly cgtextures.com, in order to download these ones. So once you've downloaded those images, we can go ahead and start to texturize this. So before we texturize anything, we need to UV unwrap these ones. So let's go into the UV editing workspace of Blender 2.8 by clicking that button over there. Then I can right click the ground, and then if I look on the top, I think calling a plane is a little boring. Let's just call it ground. By default, I think the ground looks okay. I'm just going to scale it up a lot because we're going to have a lot of repeating textures going on over here. So let's just scale it up to around about there. And I think that is okay for the ground. For my Telecannon Studios logo, and now here's the part where I have to convert my logo into a mesh. So go ahead and hit F3, convert to mesh from curve, mesh text. So now it becomes its it becomes a mesh, an actual mesh. So now that I have that, I can select everything and I can hit U, project from view, so that the logo will project onto our UV map exactly as we see it from the view. So here I want to make it, I guess the same thing, also quite large, because we're going to have a brass material over here and I want it repeating all the way throughout. So let's keep it to something around about there. Cool. So that is now done. So now let's go ahead and start to actually texturize this. So I'm going to go into shading now. So in shading view, I'm going to start with the logo. So for the logo, let's go ahead and just reuse the existing material we have over here and call it the logo. So everything is a lot more clear. We're going to use nodes for this one. The principal shader that comes with it is perfect. But we're going to be using the images that we downloaded from textures.com. Okay, so I'm just going to simply drag in the albedo, the roughness, the metallic, and the normal. So for the albedo, I'm just gonna, well, let's save here because I've generally had crashes going on whenever I work with textures in Blender 2.8. So I'm a little bit cautious when it comes to this. So for the albedo, connect the color output of the albedo into the base color input of the principal shader. Cool, so we can start to see the textures coming through now. For the metallic, put the color output of the metallic node into the input of the metallic of the principal shader. Okay, perfect. For the roughness, connect the color output of the roughness image node into the roughness input of the principal shader node. Cool, so now we're starting to make it look like brass. And finally, for the normal map, this is a little different. Don't use vector, bump, and then put the normal over here, and normal like that. After checking the documentation out, I found that it doesn't make the normal look good. It actually makes it look a little pixelated. Something just looks a little wrong with it. So I think the correct way to do it, from what I've learned, is to go Shift A, vector, normal map. And then, of course, you need to change this to non-color data as well. And then plug the color input, so the color output of the normal image into the color input of the normal map, and then the normal output node into the normal input node of the principal shader. And then that should look correct. So there we go. We have a golden looking logo, or a brass looking logo. So the shader for the logo is now complete. Next, the shader for the ground. The ground is going to be interesting. We're going to go for a sort of wet ground look. I heard Eevee is quite awesome at rendering wet looking grounds. So we're going to go ahead and create a wet looking ground for our render, which will reflect off the lights quite well. So let's go ahead and create a new material, call it ground. The base color, I'm going to go ahead straight away and use black. My logo intro video is going to be black, so I want the ground and the background to blend in quite nicely. So I'm going to use black. But to create that wet ground look, I'm going to use a noise texture to sort of make it more obvious. So if I can change the roughness to 0, so that makes it fully reflective of the surface. Since we're in shader mode, we're using the inbuilt shading HDRI image that comes in Blender 2.8. So we can see the surface over here. It looks fully wet, like 100% wet. But we're not going to go for that look. We're going to make some parts wet, some parts more diffuse. So in order to do that, we're going to be using a texture to control that, which is the noise texture. So in order to better see what we're doing, I'm just going to go ahead and for now use it as the base color. And let's just put the roughness back. Oops. Okay, so we can see over here what the noise looks like. I need to convert it. I'm going to use a factor, I think. That will convert it as a black and white image. And then from here, I will use a color ramp, converter color ramp, to control. Well, I'm going to go ahead and save this. Sorry guys, Blender 2.8 just crashed on me by doing that. So not 100% stable yet, which I thought was quite stable when I was working on the scene myself. But anyways, yeah, I think this is the part where I left off. So I'm going to add a color ramp there, and I'm going to control which part is going to be reflective or wet, and which part is going to be more diffuse. So let's just drag this part out over here. I believe the part in black will be diffuse, and the parts in white will be reflective. White equals 1, black equals 0. So 0 roughness will be, oh sorry, the black will be reflective and the white will be not reflective at all, diffuse. So a roughness of 0 will be more reflective, and a roughness of 1 will not be reflective at all. So now it's just a point of choosing from the camera view what parts of the scene should be reflective and what parts shouldn't. So I want to have a bit more areas over here, so I might go ahead and increase the scale. 20, something like that. 20 should be good. Let's increase the detail to something like 5, so it looks a lot more varied. And a bit of distortion. No, not much distortion actually. Let's just keep it like that. So something like that should be okay, as long as you see bits, and as long as you see bits where it'll be wet and bits where it will be dry. Maybe I want a little bit more wet areas, so I might drag that out more. So more black areas equals more wetter looking areas. So something like that. Okay, so once I have that, I can take okay, I can close this base color part, make it black, and then plug this color into the roughness. So I'm gonna first save it just in case. A little bit paranoid about that one. And then plug it into the roughness. And there we go. Very cool looking and very realistic now. I guess I've unintentionally covered another tutorial in this video. How to create a wet looking road in Blender Eevee. Well, there you go. Use a noise texture, color ramp, plug it into the roughness, done. But anyways, let's get back into the video. There's one more thing I need to do with this ground that I did not cover. I need to add in the little cracks. So just to make the ground look a little bit more interesting, more realistic, I'm going to add in a little bit of cracks, like as if there's cracks on the road. It could also be quite a cool effect to put the ground all the way touching the ground and having all these cracks coming out of it as if the logo smashed right into the ground. But I'm not going to really do that. I'm just going to keep it quite simple. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and grab a texture again from textures.com. I ended up using the Decals Damage Plaster 0104 image and just downloaded that PNG transparent based image. So once I have that, I can go into my textures. So I simply just took that decal image and dragged and dropped it over here, and simply just plugged the color of the mask. Oh, sorry. Since this is a black and white based image and not really a normal based image, I have to use the vector bump node and then plug the color into the height, change this from color to non-color data, hit save just in case something breaks, and then plug the normal into the normal. Since we UV unwrapped it, we should see a lot of repeating going on, and that's looking quite ugly now. So we have to fix that part. So in order to fix it, first of all, I feel like there's too much bumping going on. So, and it's also bumping outwards, not inwards. So I'm just going to hit invert to bump it inwards. So now it looks like it's bumping below the ground. Okay, and the bump is looking quite, it's actually looking quite big. So we don't need that much bump. So I'm going to put it down to 0.1. Make it look really subtle. So that's looking already, so that is already looking a whole lot better. Yeah, maybe I might still think it's a little too strong. Maybe 0.05. Yeah, something like that should be quite good. Let me move this a little bit further. And the ground is now done. So the texturing part is now complete. Next, let's look at the lighting. So in the world settings, make sure you put the world's color all the way down to black. We can't see it in our viewport over here since we're in the look dev mode and we're using HDRI. You'll only be able to see that in rendered mode. So this is the part where you can see it rendered in Eevee. At the moment you can't see anything at all. Main reason is because we don't have a light source. So we're going to go ahead and create a light source right now. So we're going to use a point lamp. So go ahead and hit Shift A, light, point, and then put the light over there. go to the light settings and change it to a green color. You don't have to put a green color, but that's the color scheme that I'm going to go for in this tutorial. And then let's have a look at what that looks like when rendered. So there we go. So at the moment it doesn't really look so cool and it doesn't look as illuminated as we want it to be. So for this logo tutorial, I wanted to make it look epic, so I'm going to play around with volumetrics. So to enable volumetrics in Blender 2.8 Eevee, just go to the render settings in the properties window. Under volumetric, just go ahead and tick that. You can play around with the settings over here, but I'll keep it the way it is right now. Later on we can increase the samples to make it look better, or decrease the tile size to make it look more sharper. But the default was pretty fine for me. Okay, with volumetrics done, you can't really see much going on in the world. I need to enable volumetrics in our world as well. So in the shader editor, go ahead and change from object to world, and you'll notice, and if I go to the world settings as well, just go ahead and click use nodes. You'll notice straight away that our world is also using nodes. So we don't need a background for our world, so I can just go ahead and delete it. So there's absolutely no color in our world at all. But we want volumetrics in our world. So in order to do that, we just go shader, volume, scatter, put it over there and plug it into volume. And there we go. We've created these god looking rays that are coming out from our lamp. So that's looking pretty cool already. So this is our first experience with volumetrics in Blender Eevee. But I feel that's a little bit too strong, too much god rays going on. So let's turn down the density of our fog to something like 0.1. I still find that's a little too strong. So maybe 0.01. Something like that should be pretty good. Okay. So that's pretty cool. So we've created one light source that is emitting these god-like rays from our logo and makes our logo look quite epic. We're also not really able to see the reflections coming from the ground. So in order to see that in Eevee, just go to the render settings and under screen space reflections, go ahead and tick that. Then you can now start to see the reflections coming through. Go ahead and also tick refraction. That just makes it look a little bit more better as well. So cool, now we can start to see the wet-ish looking ground from our render. I guess I want to see more of that reflection, so I'm just going to move the camera down further to something like that. Or at least rotate it down a bit more. I'll move the logo a little down. Yeah, something like that is looking pretty cool. Okay, so if I just see it in plain render mode, so just hide all the overlays, this is what our real-time render looks like. There's a weird circle thing I'm getting over here, and that's because Eevee has a light leak issue that I tend to find when I render stuff, where light tends to leak like this for some reason. So just turning up the exponent can sometimes help with that. But I guess for this effect, I like it a little bit. It's making my logo pop a little bit. So I'm not going to eliminate it fully. I'll just keep a faint edge like that. Maybe move it and move the light a little closer to the camera, so that we can accentuate the godly rays a bit more. So at this point, you might be thinking, that's cool and all, but the logo is not really popping. To make it pop more, that's where our second model comes into play. So remember how we created the logo light mesh a little earlier? Well, let's go ahead and enable that one now. And I guess we need to move it into place. So I'm going to go to solid mode again. Select this one. Oops. Turn off this one. Yep. And then just move it into place. All we want to do now is in front view, we want to overlay the second logo on top of the first logo. Something like that. And then from the top view, I want to move it, hit GY, around about the middle of the logo, like so. You'll see what I'm going to do in a minute. Once you've done that, I'm going to remove the material logo, that brass material that we created earlier, and create a new material. Now I'm going to call this one logo light. And for this material, let's change back from the world shader to the object shader. We're not going to use a principal shader at all. We're going to use an emission shader. Plug that into the surface. That's it. Let's go into the shader settings, and that's what it looks like. We can't see anything at all. It's because our logo light is encased within the brass model. So I need to be able to see more of that logo light coming through. So I'm going to go ahead and hit S, X, and then I don't want to scale along that direction. I wanted to scale. Let's go back over here again. Put the 3D cursor somewhere in the middle over here. Change this from median point to 3D cursor, and then go back into the rendered mode again. Then hit SX, and then scale it out on the X axis a little bit until you see something that looks like that. Then go ahead and hit SY, and then do something that looks like that. Okay, so from camera view, you get something that looks like that. You may have to go in and sometimes make some tweaks and manually move the verts out so that you can see more of the light coming through. But what this is aiming to do is create a sort of like an edge filter, like sort of like you'll see the edges of the logo better. So so sort of make your logo pop out a bit more. So for the color of the logo, I'm going to also use a green color, and then make the strength of this 10. And now we can start to see the reflection of the light coming through on the ground. So if I turn off the overlays, this is what it looks like. So now I'm just going to go in and tweak this this logo light model so that we can see more of it in so pretty much we can see more of it. So I might just go back and change the median point again. So I'll just select this one and hit SZ. Move it up on the Z axis. For the S, I hit Control L, move it in, SX, SZ. So just pretty much just go into edit mode of the light and try to make the edges more visible. So I'm just going to do this like in a real rush. But I'm not really going to cover this part. You get the idea. As long as just try to encase the logo with the light so that the edges are more obvious, more clear. All right. So once you have something like that, I mean, it's not perfect. I'm just going to go ahead and stick with that anyway. You might be still wondering, why isn't this logo popping? It's not really catching your attention. I mean, it is quite there, but it could pop a little bit more. So in order to do that, we can make use of another feature in Blender Eevee. Just go to the render settings and turn on bloom. And there we go. All of a sudden, our lights are starting to pop and our logo is starting to come through. So if you really take the time and really start to encase the lighting around your logo, it'll look better than the one that you see over here. So our logo is really now starting to shine and catch a lot of attention. But having one sort of color in our scene is not really that interesting. We can also go ahead and add some other colors in our light to complement our logo. So a secondary color, if you may. So I might just hit Shift D. Oops, I don't know what I selected there. But what I wanted to select was the point lamp. Hit Shift D and add another one just out of scene over here. And I might just change the color of that one to maybe like an orange. There we go. To create more color variation. Just to make the scene look a bit more interesting. Then might duplicate another one over here. And make this one a bit of a blue. The volumetrics really helps to push out the scene and make it look awesome. Just to add one finishing touch, we probably want to have that nice sort of sheen effect that just slides across when you see a logo intro scene. If you don't know what I'm talking about, what I actually mean is this. So if I just turn on overlays, let's go ahead and Shift A, add in a light, an area lamp. I'm going to push the light over here, rotate it around RX90, and then move it over here. Make it a slightly slightly yellowish color. Now we can really start to see the brass material come into effect. So I'm going to scale this down on the x-axis, like so, and maybe move it out just before the camera, like so. So what this is going to do, also might make it a little bit large as well. So what this will do is I'm going to animate this so that once you see the logo over here, you'll see this sheen effect like this. If you know what I'm talking about. Oof, there's too much lighting going on over there. But you'll see that nice sheen effect. So that's what we're going to try to go for with this logo. But I also don't want it to affect, I don't want it to hit the ground. So I'm just going to maybe move it and rotate it up a little. Okay, the bloom effect is a little too strong, so I might just turn down the bloom a little bit. Increase the threshold. Something like that. Okay, so now we have all our lights set up. It's just a matter of now creating the actual animation itself. So here's a tip when it comes to creating logo intro videos. Don't make it go anything higher than 10 seconds. Trust me, people tend to lose interest when logo intro videos go beyond 10 seconds. So now I want to go into the animation tab, and we're going to work on the animation of our logo intro. So I guess I can go into the shader settings for this one. And for this one, we're going to start with the area lamp. So to create a keyframe, I want to start on frame 1, as you can see over here. Actually, not. I want to wait about 40 frames or 60 frames. By the way, our animation will be rendering at, if I go to render settings, at 24 frames per second. So if I want to keep it under 10 seconds, I need to keep it under 24 times 10 frames. So that's 240 frames. So maybe my final one will be less than 200 frames. So let's change the end animation to 200 frames. And I want this sliding light effect to come somewhere between 170 and 60. So let's start at 60. Create a keyframe. So I'm just going to hit that automatic keyframe insertion. And then over here, I'm just going to simply hit G. And then left click. That'll add a keyframe over there. Then scrub all the way to 170. Then hit GX in the 3D viewport. And scrub it all the way there until you cannot see. Oops, why is it acting like that? Sometimes Eevee acts a bit strange, so you might have to go out of look dev and into it again in order to see things clearly. Modeling. Let's go to the layout render. Go into the shaded viewport. And if I hit space, I can hit the play button over here, or I can hit space. So I'm going to go to frame 1 by hitting that, and hit space. And now I can see that cool sheen effect. Oh, it didn't go far enough. So go ahead and grab X and really move it out of the way. So if I go over somewhere here, hit space. Cool. That's looking pretty cool. Maybe our logo can be a little bigger. I feel like we're not capturing enough. S 1.5. No, that's too big. That's clearly too big. Yeah. So now it's just simply a matter of tweaking. Keep tweaking it until you get the look that you like. I wanted a more, this orange color didn't look quite good to me. I wanted a more distinct orange look. For the blue, I also wanted a more distinct darkish bluish look. So that it sort of popped a bit more. For the logo light, I guess I wanted the T to stand out more. Actually, pretty much all these top over here to stand out a bit more. Everything off the edges, they need to stand out a bit more as well. Okay, so now that we have that sort of light flaring effect, we can go ahead now and work on our camera animation. So it really depends on what kind of transition you want to go for over here. For my camera, if I go ahead and select the camera, another light flare effect comes around frame 60, so I might move somewhere around here, 61 maybe. With my camera selected, I'm just going to go ahead and hit G and add a keyframe right there. Then on frame 1, I might zoom in. I might go on D because that's what my first name starts with, and then just go inside it like so. And maybe rotate a little bit as well. Create that kind of a transition. And then I know it's a bit boring, but I'll just end it off as a I might just end it off with a fade out effect, so I can use that in a video editor. I might just go Shift D, duplicate once more. And move it a little bit back. Maybe add in another color for the light, maybe like a blue. Let's see what that looks like. Oops. Duplicate that one. And then make it this like a blue. I wonder what that would look like. That's pretty cool. So I've added like another light source to it. A double light source to it. Okay, so some finishing touches that I can do to this. Maybe in the camera settings, I can enable depth of field. So maybe I can add a empty over here. So let's turn on the overlays. Shift A, let's add in an empty. Empty does nothing, it's just there to control the depth of field of our object. So I'll call this empty, our depth of field object. And the camera, if I just turn on limits, viewport display, turn on limits, I'm also going to turn on the depth of field to be the depth of field object, like so. And I want to put this crazy low, something like 2. We can't see it yet in Eevee because under render settings we have to also enable depth of field, and now we can start to see that depth of field effect on the ground, which is making it look pretty cool. So I guess one final thing to finish the transition of this logo is animate this depth of field object. So hit G over there, and then let's move it all the way to the end of our animation. Then hit G, Y, and move it closer and closer to the camera until it blurs out to nothing. Something like that. So now if I play back my animation from beginning to end, turn off overlays, this is what it looks like. Pretty cool. So now the camera animation is done. One final thing that I did to make it pop a bit more is play around with the animation of the lights. When things move in the scene, it's a lot more interesting compared to when things just stand still. So I'm just going to make this light move, I don't know, randomly. So let's make it move there. Let's make it move a little bit there, opposite. Then suddenly over here. And then suddenly back over here. Okay, this blue light as well, we can animate it so that start the animation there since it's more visible. We can move it here, we can move it back here again, we can move it further up, we can maybe move it back down again. Okay, and not only that, we can also do some movements in the lighting as well. So select one of the logo lights, if I can. There we go. We can sort of animate this movement as well. I can do it by hand, or I can use one of the available modifiers in Blender. So let's go ahead and add, we already have an object transform. So I can go ahead and maybe go to the graph editor. Go to the graph editor, and here's a handy little trick. I just select the, let's see, I want to maybe move it only on the X location. So select the X location, hit this plus button over here. Under modifiers over here, hit add modifier and add noise. So you can see that the X location now has a lot of noise, which means it's moving radically left and right, which is not good for my case. I want it to be a lot more subtle. So turn the scale up to something like 10. So it moves a lot slower, maybe even slower than that. But at the same token, I don't want to move so far out. So turn the strength down to something like 0.5. That's still too much. Maybe 0.1. Just make it subtle. Perfect. I'll do the same for the blue lighting at the back as well. So the same thing for this one. Add a keyframe by hitting G and then plus. Make sure automatic keyframe is turned on. Then turn on object transform, select X location, add modifier, noise, and I want to do the same thing. Strength 20, scale 20, strength 0.1. But I think it's going to move the same direction, so maybe I might have to add in a bit of an offset, so it's a bit more random. That's cool. One other thing we can do, I know there's so many things we can play around with the animation over here. Play around with the strength of the lights as well. So not only that, but maybe I can play around with the energy. So I can make the lights dim randomly as well. So what I need to do is go and add a keyframe over here, and then under point, select energy, and do the same thing. Add a modifier, noise, and we can see the lights sort of dim up and down. So in this case, I want it to be same thing, quite varied. Maybe strength can be a little bit more larger. And this halo can also, this one over here, I can select it, yeah, that one. We can also add a keyframe, oops, not that one, add a keyframe for just the energy. And then add a noise modifier for that. Make the strength large, and then strength also quite large as well. So let's go add energy for the third one as well. Then add for energy, just add in a modifier, noise, and turn the scale up quite big, 23. Move the offset quite away. And make the strength quite big as well. Finally, we can do the same for the logo lights. Add in some strength. Add in some keyframes to the strength. So go ahead and hit I. And then for logo light, the node tree, that default value of strength, can go ahead and hit noise, and you don't want it to be too much difference, but we'll keep it like that. Okay, cool. So I think now we are done with our scene. I guess there's a final bit of interest. There's so much animation going on here, But we can go ahead and select the camera, and then I might just add in a slight movement of the camera from left to right, as if the camera is being moved by the hand. So I might select the X location, add a modifier, hit noise, scale it up quite big, 26. That's moving too much, so turn down the strength. Something like that. Don't worry about the lighting that's going on there. Sometimes Eevee can make a mistake. I think where our lighting is okay. It's not. It won't be overblown like this. Yeah, I think that's okay. 0.1. The more subtle it is, the better. And one thing I might also do is the Euler rotation for this one. There's the X Euler rotation. I might, for the X Euler rotation, also going to add in a noise and turn the strength down to 0.1. I think we're now done. Let's have a look at what that looks like once rendered. I know the lighting here looks so overblown. I don't know why. When I render it, it looks okay. So I don't understand why it's looking like that. Maybe some issue with maybe something to do with, oh, there it is. I don't know what caused that. But anyways, before we go ahead and create an animation from that, I want to do some compositing. So let's go ahead and go into the compositing workspace of Blender 2.8. Go ahead and tick use nodes and auto render. I'm just going to do some very quick compositing effects. So go ahead and add an output viewer. We're going to go add a lens distortion. Plug that into the viewer and hit V so that you can see what's going on in the background. What I want to do is I want to distort it by 0.02, so make it look a little bit like a fisheye lens. And I want to add in a bit more dispersion than I usually do, so maybe 0.03 or 0.05. Yeah, something like that would be cool. I might also go and add in a RGB curves node. And what I want to do is I want to make it a little bit brighter here, but also darken it a bit in the areas that are not dark, so that we get a bit more of that contrast. Yeah, something like that. High contrast tends to look good for these types of scenes, for these types of logo intros. But make the bright parts look a bit more brighter. Okay, and finally I'll just go ahead and add in a color balance node, just to create a sort of a color scheme for this. That might be a little too much. Yeah, something like that looks pretty cool. Very, very simple. Just added an RGB curves node, a color balance node, and a lens distortion node, and that's pretty much it for the compositing. If I want to do any further compositing, I guess I can do it a little bit later, but I'm not gonna spend too much time on this one. I think it's pretty much okay. One final thing that I'll do is I'll probably enable motion blur, since we have a bit of camera movement, and especially in that beginning scene where we zoom out from the D, it'll probably be pretty cool to see that motion blur effect. So I'm just going to bump up the samples to maybe 128, and yeah, let's just see what that looks like. Oh, I need to do one thing. I need to select where I want to output it. So if you want to if you want to output this into a video file, just go ahead and select that one and go into logos. You can either render it out as an image and later combine it, but I think since it's 200 frames, there's no risk of it really crashing, even though it is a beta version. But I'm just going to take the risk anyway and call it the logo intro. Name it whatever you like. Hit accept. And for the video format output itself, I'm going to change this from PNG to FFmpeg video. For the encoding, I'm going to use an MPEG-4. H.264 is okay, I think. I think this should be fine. So let's just see what that looks like once rendered. If you know about these video settings and stuff, go ahead and play with it. So that's it. I'm going to go ahead and render this into an animation. To finally go ahead and render it into an animation video, go ahead and click render and render animation. So hopefully it won't take too long, since it is Eevee. I expect it to be a lot more faster than Cycles. So I'll be back, hopefully not too long. But for you guys, it'll be pretty much instant in 3, 2, 1. And that's it. That is how you render a logo intro in Blender 2.8 and rendered in Eevee. So if you like this video, please help to like, share and subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.